Welcome everyone to day 3 of the Lawyers in Energy Network Series 2.0 in partnership with Centurion Law Group and Bromshy Consultancy. We apologize for the delay in today's training. Kindly do bear with us. Over the past 2 days, we have had very distinguished scholars who had come to educate us on the negotiation process in African energy transaction and understanding governing laws and regulation in the African energy sector, where they took us through the various sources of energy, the realities of energy in Africa, the different negotiation phase and clauses to watch out for when negotiating a contract. Please, I'm going to take a time out. I'll get back to you shortly. Welcome back once again. Our speaker was not available earlier. We're thinking before we're just going to do a summary of his presentation, but he just called in and apologized for not joining on time and is going to join us shortly. So kindly let's bear with him and give him 2 minutes. Thank you. Sorry everyone for that breaking transmission. We were having communications issues, but now we are happy to have resolved it. Once again, let me start by welcoming everyone to the day 3 of the Lawyers in Energy Network Training Series 2.0 in partnership with Centurion Law Group and Bromshy Consultancy. Like I said earlier, over the past 2 days, we have had very distinguished scholars who has come to educate us on the negotiation process in African energy transaction and understanding governing laws and regulation in the African energy sector, where they took us through the various sources of energy, the realities of energy in Africa, the different negotiation phase, and clauses to watch out for when negotiating a contract. We also learned the various meanings and sources of energy law, their roles in energy relations, and challenges faced in energy transactions. Their presentations and video recordings have been set to individual emails, and you can also rewatch the recording on our YouTube channel at Lawyers in Energy Network. Today, Dr. Ayodele Oni will be taking us through how to conduct due diligence investigation in the African energy industry by delving into shares and shareholders contracts, real estate transactions, environmental matters, and intellectual property rights. Before he starts his presentation, I would like to read out his short profile. Dr. Ayodele Oni has a knack for creating ingenious and effective strategies to ensure the success of transactions he is involved in. Dr. Ayodele is also an active leading voice and thought leader in the development of many transformative policy changes in Nigeria, especially in the energy sector, such as oil, gas, and electric power. Specifically, he has played key roles in developing template documents, rules and regulations used in the natural gas and electric power sector. Dr. Ayodele has also been recognized as being in a league of his own by the internationally renowned directory of Who is Who Legal, and has also been ranked among the world's leading lawyers in the Chambers and Partners and the Legal 500. Dr. Ayodele Oni has been actively involved in several oil and gas transactions, including the Shell divestment deals and Chevron divestments of interest in a number of oil mining leases. He has also advised and continued to advise on a number of marginal field transactions, including the year 2020 marginal fields bid round, and several oil and gas acquisition, divestment, and financing transaction. Dr. Ayodele was part of the team that provided legal advisory to the Bureau of Public Enterprises on the post-privatization restructuring of the electric power sector. He has also provided legal, policy, and regulatory support to the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. He is an adjunct lecturer and author of Leading Energy Test. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Ayodele Oni. Welcome, sir.
Hello?
Doctor, we can hear you. Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I apologize. I had issues connecting. I was in transit and then I ended up having some challenges. Good morning. So we will start now. Do I bring up my presentation or is it something you will do for me?
You can share your screen, sir. We've made you a co-host already.
Okay, I'll share my screen now. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. No, I'm sharing the wrong thing. Where is my... I opened this document. I believe you can see my presentation now.
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Yes, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
Again, I apologize. I've been in transit and, things just became a bit difficult. I've been preparing for this for a while. Okay, so we'll be looking at conducting due diligence. Am I supposed to be admitting people, or is this something you will be doing?
We'll be admitting them from here, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll be looking at conducting due diligence investigations in the African energy industry. To start with, I'll be saying quite a bit, or giving quite a bit of information outside of this presentation, giving examples from experience, of course, to the extent that confidentiality allows. I will try to give practical examples. I'll give examples out of what you see in this presentation. I believe it's for 2 hours. So I'll give my very best to do as much as I can, also to make it practical and not just theoretical. That's the intention behind this program. So the title is Conducting Due Diligence Investigations, actually, in the African energy industry. So we continue. Okay, so this is our outline. Introduction to the African energy industry, due diligence in the energy industry, deal and transaction types, initial phase of due diligence, primary phase of due diligence, areas of due diligence, what the due diligence report should contain, the art of the deal itself. So when you speak to energy, you'd be looking at oil, gas, power, renewables, from production up to the point, or up to the burner point, up to the last, or up to the consumer. Whether you are speaking of drilling for gas, for oil, whether you speak about the transportation, whether you think about the retail sale, you generally be speaking to energy. So energy is, so when you say someone is an energy lawyer, for example, that means the person does oil and gas, the person does power, the person does even renewables now, Everyone's speaking about energy transition. And in that sense, you're looking less at hydrocarbons, fossil fuels. You are looking more at solar energy. See, I called it energy, solar energy. You're looking at solar energy, you're looking at wind, some people would even say, generally speaking, small hydro plants, those are renewables. So energy isn't just oil and gas. Energy extends to power. And when you speak about power generally, you would also be referring to renewables. So it's broad. So without energy, can you really, you need energy for every aspect of life, from industrialization to becoming a modern nation to socio-economic development of the African continent. We require energy. The only thing we then need to do is to add value in this part of the world. The thing that is missing is our inability to add value to energy. So we produce oil and gas, but we need to refine that oil, that crude, to finished products. Those are the things missing, because from a balance of trade and balance of payment point of view, if you produce crude, for example, and you export it and make $2 billion, if the country you've exported it to adds value to it, they may be able to sell it back to you, unfortunately, for $3.5 billion, meaning that they've gained $1.5 billion from the $2 billion you sold your crude. So it's not sufficient for us to have energy. That's what's missing in this part of the world. Without value addition, without refining, without adding value to it, without processing it. That's why, for example, you see that we complain that there isn't cooking gas every now and then, or cooking gas becomes expensive because cooking gas becomes expensive because we don't process our natural gas sufficiently, or aspects produced. Cooking gas is primarily butane and propane, depending on what part of the world you are in. In the colder regions, it's mostly made out of propane. But in the warmer regions like Nigeria, it's mostly made out of butane. That's cooking gas. But because we only produce natural gas, generally speaking, or crude aspects made from crude without refining sufficiently or processing sufficiently, we export, and then we have to buy finished products from abroad. So we need to import finished products. So from a balance of trade and balance of payment point of view, we're at a deficit. Now, Africa, what would we say about Africa's energy endowment? We've got abundance of natural resources, more so countries like Nigeria, countries like Angola. Even if you go to some North African countries, you find out that we've got enormous natural resources and even renewable energy potential. In a country like Nigeria, we've got substantial renewable energy potential. We can get maximum benefits from power and the energy sector for years to come. Everyone continues to say crude will finish. People have been saying that for several decades, but we continue to discover more oil in Africa. We continue to discover more oil. So in 50 years, in 100 years, we'll probably continue to speak about oil and gas, particularly gas. But because of issues such as decarbonization and energy transition, the relevance of oil will continue to wane, but gas will still continue to play a role. That's why you may be aware that from last year to 2030, that decade has been declared as a decade of gas. That decade from 2011 to from 2021 to 2030 has been declared the decade of gas in Nigeria, for example. So we have gas resources in this part of the world and in Africa. We have crude, but like I mentioned, everyone's talking about electric vehicles. So renewable energy would begin to play more substantial roles in the world's energy needs. People would say that the Stone Age didn't end because there was no longer stone. So the fact that we'll continue to have oil and gas, hydrocarbons, doesn't mean that the time or the period for oil and gas, oil in particular, will not end. So we should begin, for all of us who do energy, we should also begin to look at how we can play more substantial roles in renewables. I see that some law firms are beginning to have units that are renewable energy focused. So I think it's something we need to begin to take into consideration. Now, recent important discoveries have bettered a promising decade for the continent. So there have been interesting discoveries in different parts of Africa, more so Nigeria. Unfortunately, because of the Petroleum Industrial Act, the PIB initially was a bill, took almost 2 decades, if not even more than 2 decades, maybe closer to 2 decades, because we began to hear about it around 2007. So 2017, say 15 years, 15, 16 years, So we seem to be behind, particularly in Nigeria. So countries like Ghana, like Angola, a few countries have made newer discoveries, and there's been a promising decade. Also with the war currently going on between Ukraine and Russia. our energy resources. For example, the OPEC has increased quotas, Nigeria's quota, but we've had challenges because of crude theft, maybe and other issues and lack of investment for a long time. And partnerships between leaders, multinational companies, and international organizations and businesses. Rise in oil and gas exploration and production activities. The most famous discovery of 2021 was the discovery of a massive reserve of light oil off the coast of Angola in the deep sea block 15 ocean. And there have been pockets of shale gas. The pockets of shale gas were also discovered in South Africa's Karoo basin, rather. So there's also been discoveries. There have been establishment of new natural gas pipelines. Even Nigeria many of us will be aware of the Ajaokuta Kaduna Kano natural gas pipeline serving as part of the broader Trans-Nigerian Gas Pipeline project. And I'll tell you a bit about that project. Incidentally, I'm involved in advising on that project. What that project entails is to be able to ultimately supply gas in the northern part of the country across, and to also be able to connect to North Africa. And ultimately, many of us, I'm sure, we are aware that North Africa is once you're in North Africa, you may actually, in 35 minutes, be in Europe. So North Africa is quite close to Europe. So the idea is to ensure that we can continue to have comparative, if not absolute advantage, at least in Africa, in being able to supply natural gas. So the idea is we will then connect, like I stated, with North Africa and Europe, so that we can sell our gas to Europe. Imagine that project had been completed. We will already at this time, because of what Russia has been doing to other European countries, shutting off gas, threatening them. And this is not the first time. So I'm wondering why many of them waited up to now. For a long time, I remember when I was doing my master's, once or twice I was traveling back to Nigeria, whether I was going to get married or do one or two other things. During my master's around 2009, 2010, I realized that, and some of you might be aware, Russia shut off gas to some countries in Europe. There was always that threat. So from an energy security point of view, much of Europe should have found other alternatives and maybe supported Africa, a country like Nigeria in particular, to develop its gas resources, particularly infrastructure connecting to Europe before now, so that at this time they wouldn't have the challenges they have. That's why I'm sure many of you have heard about the inflation going on around the world, more so in Europe, because of the challenges in the war and the increase in energy prices. There's 1,800 kilometer Tanzania-Uganda natural gas pipeline project to transport liquefied natural gas from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania to Kampala and Uganda. Now, let me do a quick distinction between LNG and gas pipeline for gas supply. LNG is liquefied natural gas. Whilst you can transport gas, generally speaking, through two means, maybe more than two. You can do pipelines, and you could do what people call virtual pipelines. Virtual pipelines means other than pipelines, maybe trucks. You can convert to maybe CNG, depending on that gas type, or LNG. LNG just means your typical natural gas, and you then liquefy same. I think it's at minus 161 degrees centigrade. You can do your check. You put in what they call cryogenic tanks, and you put them on boats, on large vessels, and you transport them internationally. So the reason why people do LNG, and you'll be wondering, LNG is quite expensive, but over short distances, pipelines are cheaper. But for long-term projects and over longer distances, LNG is a better means because to build, gas pipelines are more expensive than oil. Now imagine that you're going to pass it through water. It's going to be way more expensive, the process, what they're going to go through. And over time, people have discovered that it's cheaper to do it with liquefied natural gas than to do it with gas pipelines. So that's the difference. It's same gas. It's just that you liquefy it. I think at minus 161 degrees, you freeze it at that, so it becomes liquid. You then move it in what they call cryogenic, CRYGONIC, cryogenic tanks. You move it from wherever it is elsewhere, particularly Europe is where we sell a lot of LNG. There's also the $6 billion 2,600 kilometer Africa Renaissance pipeline project connecting Mozambique's rich gas Rumba River region to Gauteng in South Africa. So the number of gas projects coming on. Remember, I said in the beginning that gas is becoming the transition fuel for Nigeria and some parts of Africa. Now, there's high demand for renewable energy. I've seen EV cars in Nigeria. I've seen a Tesla. I've seen a few Teslas in Nigeria. So people are beginning to embrace renewable energy. People are beginning to embrace wind, embrace solar. Some people talk about geothermal. Some speak to even nuclear fission, which is, of course, when you remember accidents in Chernobyl, when you remember accident in Fukushima, you're beginning to wonder whether a country like Nigeria that has a slow response to emergencies can actually adopt some means of energy. So there's significant traction and investment in recent years, particularly South Africa. South Africa is doing a lot. I understand the growth has been 900% in the last few years for renewable energy. Renewable energy is projected to account for a major chunk of total power generation capacity in the next 10 years. Egypt aims at producing 20% of electricity from renewable energy sources by 2023. Recall Nigeria had a 2020 policy that 20% of energy, meeting our energy requirements. Now, when I refer to energy in this sense, power will be through renewable energy. And then that changed because we definitely were not even near meeting that. It then changed to 30% by year 2030. And it appears that that's where we are. So that demand seems to be increasing. That's why Tesla is becoming a huge company, and its value is going over the roof, and it's even beginning to get more valuable than the traditional car manufacturers. Many of them are even taking, I like cars, so many of them are beginning, for example, the new BMW 7 Series. They have both an I version, which is electric, and they have an internal combustion version. When you say internal combustion, you're talking about your typical car that uses petrol, that uses fossil fuel, So, and they made it the same way. I don't know. For those of you who've seen the new S-Class, there is both the electronic S-Class, the EV S-Class, and the internal combustion. And I think the EV S-Class is ugly compared to the internal combustion. But what BMW then did was made the same version, same type of its car, but whilst one is electronic, the other is fossil fuel. The other is internal combustion. One is electronic. So portfolio diversification, we are lawyers. So we should begin to look at, and I always tell people that the good energy lawyer is a lawyer who knows a bit of finance, who knows a bit of land law, who can apply all of these very strong in commercial law, who can apply all of these to energy transactions. And then people are beginning to, and I think you too should diversify your portfolio. When I say portfolio, what you do, from doing just being a typical oil and gas lawyer to beginning to consider doing more renewables. Because if the world is moving to renewables, then you will not be, if you are not careful, you will not be making money like you used to. So it's very critical, it's very crucial that we begin to take that into consideration. So portfolio diversification. So smart investors are going beyond the core business functions and core business of fossil fuels, crude, natural gas, shale, bitumen. People are now looking at renewables, like examples of which we have discussed. Now, because of the risk of oil and gas commodity price fluctuations, we've always spoken about fluctuation in energy prices. Any new information leads to a change in oil and gas prices. Once there are rumors of war, oil prices start going up. You understand? So it's so. I'm trying to remember that word. It just keeps changing. Oil and gas prices they don't remain stable. Okay, now due diligence in the energy industry. I'll be saying quite a bit. First, I'll make a few points before we begin to look at the presentation itself. Due diligence is a very critical aspect of almost every transaction, even social transactions. You want to get married, you want to date someone, you want to go on social media and check whether you see information around that person. Is the person already dating someone else such that you end up being a side chick or a side guy? Is that person already married? Is that person lying about certain things? So you want to go on Google to check that person out. You want to check the person's LinkedIn. You want to check what the person says on Twitter. You want to go and check even the person's Instagram account. That's due diligence. So most times we do things, we take steps. It ends up being due diligence. You want to marry someone and you want to check whether they have certain illnesses. Historically, they've had certain illnesses, particularly if you know people who know them. It's all due diligence. Even in social interactions, we have due diligence. That's one. Two, due diligence is important because when you advise your clients, it helps you know whether or not your client should be doing the deal, or whether your client should be doing the deal differently. And I'll give you a good example. Like I mentioned, I'll be saying quite a bit outside of these slides, just for you to get useful information and from my experience. I've been involved in a transaction where some guys wanted to buy the shares of a company because they were interested in the power plant. However, that company had a lot of debts. They were indebted to banks. They weren't paying their gas. They weren't paying for gas and all of that. Now, in that instance, clients can say anything to you. They can say, I want to do a share deal. I want to buy over that company. What you need to begin to inquire is what they actually want. Is it a particular asset? So when you do your due diligence and check indebtedness, check the state of the asset, you check what liabilities they have. Do they owe taxes? Have they been paying their payee? What's the state of that asset? Are there regulatory compliance challenges, where they are generally with that asset? You make your checks. And at the end of the day, you produce a report. That report may show indebtedness. Have they created security over their assets? Is there an all asset debenture? Is there a floating charge that will crystallize under certain circumstances? That's what would then determine whether you advise your client to convert what they wanted to do from an asset sale, from a share sale to an asset transaction. It depends on the circumstances. You may find out that, if they buy the shares, when you buy the shares of the company, you are buying both its assets and its liabilities directly and or indirectly. So your due diligence will help you determine whether to structure the deal one way or the other. Because I always tell my colleagues, that particularly younger colleagues, that a client can tell you, I want A, B, C, D, E, F. It's you who is going to do your analysis and determine whether the client really knows what they want. At times, clients don't know what they want. So you'd have to guide them to where they should be at. So I always say, whenever a client says, I want to do A, B, C, D, now what you should be looking at is the ultimate goal, not the process or the procedure for achieving it. Because they might have a procedure in mind from a legal regulatory compliance point of view that may not work. So due diligence helps you determine whether you should structure the deal differently from what the client says they want. So that's an important aspect of your due diligence. Now, another thing that is important is that due diligence is not for you to just write facts. We saw this, they owe debt. We saw a letter from DPR that they might revoke their lease or license. We saw a letter from DPR that they might cancel their concession. It's not sufficient for you to just write facts. You must state what those facts mean. What do they mean in the grand scheme of things? Do they mean don't do the deal? Do they mean do the deal differently? Do they mean you need to get some representations and warranties? Do they mean restructure this deal? Do they mean ask questions? Do they mean draft the sale and purchase agreement differently from what you were considering before? Do they mean ask for additional security? Do they mean get a parent company guarantee? Do they mean get a standby letter of credit? So your findings should be analyzed. It's not just that we saw A, B, C, D, E, F, G. No. When you saw them, what do they mean? Can you mitigate the risk in this transaction based on your findings? Can you structure this transaction differently based on your findings? That's the purpose of due diligence at the end of the day. You understand? And because energy transaction, you want to do an acquisition, you want to do a divestment, you need huge sums of money, you even want to do a project. You understand? Most of these require due diligence. So before you expend large volumes of money or funds, or before your client does that, it's important that you conduct your due diligence and know what the risks are, how to mitigate that risk, or whether you shouldn't do the deal at all. In that transaction I mentioned to you, we had a few options because the indebtedness of the company was huge. We could, do an asset deal, but we then discovered that they had created security over the power plant. Because if they hadn't created security, we would then have done an asset deal. So at the end of the day, my client didn't go ahead with the deal. It was so bad that after the deal fell through, we now also discovered from industry intelligence that what we saw was only a tip of the iceberg, that there were larger challenges, larger indebtedness that company had. You understand? So from a practical standpoint, a due exercise is essential. It's an essential part of most significant corporate and commercial transactions. And it helps parties determine whether a transaction is viable in the first place. It will typically involve the collation and review of documents which determine a party's ability to fulfill its obligations in a transaction, any conditions precedent to the transaction, and risks inherent in that transaction. Like I said to you, the essence, or like I've suggested, the essence of due diligence is not to identify and highlight problems for the sake of doing that, because those may make the transaction impossible or difficult to conclude or implement. But due diligence enables advisors and their clients to understand the true state of affairs of the parties to a transaction, as well as those of their relevant affiliates, the status of the applicable asset, with a view to, one, you want to identify the gaps in order to enable, in order to be able to determine appropriate actions and steps to be taken to address or at least mitigate the identified challenges, thereby maximizing value for clients and enhancing client negotiating capacity. You also generally want to ascertain and advise on negotiation capacity. You want to determine, ascertain and advise on optimal structures for implementing your transactions. It's very important. And like a former boss used to say, someone I learned a lot from, Ken Yoduawo, he used to say that it's not for you to, due diligence is not for you to just say this, there's a problem here, there's a problem there, there's a problem here. How are you going to deal with that problem? How are you going to resolve it? You understand? So it's not the due diligence is not just to identify or highlight a litany of problems, but for identifying possible problems and mitigants or a solution to such problems. So that's general. I just wanted to give you my general perspective around due diligence before we now go into those risks. Let's take a 1-2 minute water break before we go into anticipating the risk, managing the risk, and bankability. Thank you very much. So we want to continue. Okay, I guess I can share my presentation now. We will continue. Okay, I hope you can see my presentation. Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
yeah, so a key thing around due diligence is risk management. In conducting your due diligence, you need to identify legal, operational, political, and environmental risks. And you need to be able to determine how those risks will be dealt with, who takes those risks, and how you will mitigate them. You need to, and usually, experienced legal and technical professional advisors will be engaged. Recall that it's important that in your the due diligence, and you may need to advise your client. Due diligence should not be limited to only legal. You want to have technical, you want to have commercial stroke, a financial due diligence, because that's important. You want to ensure that your due diligence is your due diligence is comprehensive, and it's all embracing. It's not just limited to legal. Whilst you do legal, you would also have other technical people do technicals. And at times, what you say in your legal impacts the technical and other due diligence, as other aspects of due diligence. What the other people should look out for. If you say, oh, you found out that there are a lot of debts, it's not clear if they've been repaid and all of those, then the financial, so commercial due diligence will take more look at those aspects. So legal due diligence is very, very crucial. At times, it's the fulcrum upon which other aspects of the deal rest. And the issues you raise help your technical colleagues and commercial colleagues to take further steps. Now, another thing around due diligence is to manage risk. You identify which party can best control and manage the variables relevant to each identified risk, and contractually allocate each identified risk to the applicable party and include remedies for failure to manage those risks. So due diligence helps you in doing your due diligence. You would identify the risk, you state the parties. For example, if there is a risk of loss, you begin to then determine whether you want to take insurance. You want to determine, if you take insurance, there's a chance it will make your deal more expensive. However, would it still make it commercially viable? At that point, your commercial people or the person doing the financial due diligence may then step in. That's crucial and that's important, when you do your due diligence. Bankability. Bankability is the willingness of a lender to finance a project, and a project's risk profile and risk sharing protocol is a key feature in improving the bankability of a project. So when you are of a transaction generally, remember that when you do your due diligence, even at times, most times, even lenders will have their own lawyers conduct due diligence in order to be able to determine whether that project is bankable. Now, depending on what your deal type, and depending on who you are representing, there may be emphasis. So if you are representing a bank and the bank has told you to conduct due diligence on their behalf, what you will be diligencing will be, and the way you write your due diligence will be slightly different from if you are doing it for a buyer. For example, the key thing for a bank is bankability. Is that transaction bankable? What are the risks? Should we put money with an escrow agent such that before closing, when some of the risks have been adequately dealt with, the escrow agent will release the money to the counterparty or to the bank's clients? You want to know you want to clearly identify the risks in your due diligence, and you want to provide mitigants. And you probably, in some cases, want to rate those mitigants, whether they absolutely solve the problem, whether a limited amount of risk still involved, or whether the risk is still substantial. You know, when you do your due diligence, that's very, very crucial in your due diligence. Now, I always say that due diligence is factual or should be factual, should be analytical, should look at structure, and should play a huge role in problem solving. You understand? So when you speak about due diligence being factual, you are saying that you have to identify, and the more junior lawyers, you have to identify as many facts as possible. You know, you want to check whether the seller has title to that asset. For example, you want to check whether it's subject to a limited duration or to certain conditions. You want to check whether there are encumbrances to the seller's title. These are facts. You want to check the physical condition of the asset to the extent that you can determine the same. You want to find out whether there's any litigation existing or contingent. I don't know if you know the difference between the types of liabilities in this sense. That's why you at times you hear that liability is contingent, or there's a legacy liability. Now, the difference generally is one already exists, one is conditional upon certain things existing. For example, if someone takes you or takes your client or the counterparty, the guys you are due diligencing, someone's taking them to court over, say, 4 billion naira. There's a contingent liability because it's contingent because that person who's taking them to court may or may not win. So what you typically do is you have to provision for that. You have to mention it in your due diligence. That's factual. Do they have their regulatory permits in place? Do they have the relevant approvals, including environmental permits and co? You understand? All of these are very, very important facts you need to take into consideration. If you're doing an upstream transaction, for example, you want to find out whether the duration left in their mining lease. You understand? You want to find out the duration left in their oil and gas pipeline license. You understand? You want to find out whether same is at risk. You want to find out whether what is known as the commission or the authority, depending on the transaction, whether they've written them any letters threatening to revoke their rights. Do they have farming agreements? What are the agreements they have? What do those agreements state? What do they provide? What are their rights? Do they need third-party consent in practice? Do they need any third-party consent? You understand? These are the issues that need to be dealt with. Do they have title to the land where the project is located, or do they have a lease? And what's the duration of that lease? You understand? These are factual inquiries you need to make. You know, is there a chance that that title will be revoked? Do they have their environmental permits in place? Your corporate due diligence. We have the 2020 CAMA. Do they have, you've gone to CAC, you've gone to check ownership, you've gone to check whether they've created security, registrable security that's been registered. You know, those are issues you need to take into consideration, and you need to be clear and right as to your fact. Remember that you will be analyzing, and that's the next point, you'll be analyzing these facts. You have to state what these facts mean. You know, material contracts. What are your what material contracts do you have? You understand? What material contracts do they have? Have they been paying their taxes? Remember that under the FIRS Act, they can inquire and keep your tax record up to, I think it's 6 or 7 years. And that's what the act says. I don't remember the exact number of years. I think it's six years, you know. So they can go back 6 years to check your record. So in do your own deal, you can even add 1 more year, make it 7 years. You understand? There's petroleum, there's hydrocarbons tax act, I tax now. Remember that even exploration companies now pay CETA. So it's a dual tax system now with the new Petroleum Industry Act. You understand? So you have to know all those facts, material claims and litigation, is there arbitration, you understand? And then you analyze, what do all these mean? Do they mean that the asset is at risk? Should you be negotiating a lower price? Let me tell you about a deal I did like 10 years ago. When we did that transaction, my senior colleagues and bosses at that time had a relationship with DPR. That asset was going to be, DPR told them, what was then DPR? I told them they were going to revoke that asset. But my boss had strong relationships with the DPR, and I told them that our client was looking to buy that asset. And could they stay any revocation? And describe the client, gave them information as to the capacity of the client and all of that. So DPR was happy, and DPR said, okay, as long as your deal closes, we would not revoke anymore. You know, provided proof of financial capacity to be able to meet work programs and all of that. But we didn't tell the counterparty that they were not going to revoke anymore. All we did show them was we saw letters from DPR that they were going to revoke. And because of that information, they felt we were buying an asset at risk, and we were able to get a lower price, a huge discount from what they were asking for. It was in the process of due diligence that we saw that DPR had written them letters that they were going to revoke that asset. This is even more than 10 years ago, maybe like 12, 15 years ago, around 2010. That's like 12 years ago. You understand? We did that due diligence, and we saw those facts. And the analysis was that the asset was at risk. Your analysis can be that they need to take insurance. Your analysis can be that you need to do further checks. You need to get more information. You need to ask for reps and warranties, you know. So you need to analyze those facts you find. And then you need to then advise on best way to structure your transaction. You know, at the point of doing your DD, finding the fact, analyzing the fact, then you're able to determine how best to structure that deal. Your client might be saying, oh, I want to buy all the shares of that company. But you find out that your client is actually particularly interested in a particular asset. And if there's no security already created over that asset, and contracts don't prevent you, because of course you have to review almost all. DD is not easy. That's why, and I can give you ideas. That's why I tell people, whenever you do DD, depending on the size of the deal, don't be asking for 1, 2, 3, 4 million. Be looking at anywhere from 10 million to whatever. Could even be as high as 100 million, depending on the value of that deal, the amount of work you need to put into it. Don't let anyone hoodwink you into taking nonsense money for due diligence, because it's a lot of work. You may be reviewing over 100 documents. You understand? And you know, typically what you have now in the industry is you have virtual data rooms. For example, I'm advising one of the bidders for 2 of the assets of the NIPP, those NIPP projects, those power plants built during Ambassador's time. I'm sure you are aware that government is looking to sell those assets. And I'm advising, and I'm having to review, my team and I, my colleagues and I, are having to review several documents, you know. So in that case, you want to take anything from 10 million naira or the dollar equivalent at the minimum for your due diligence. That's very important if you want to do a great job. Because like I say, the next step is you need to then advise on structure. How do you want to structure the deal? Do you want to structure it as an asset sale instead of a share sale? You want to structure it. Is it better as a share sale? Is it better that you have the seller hold the assets in trust for you for a period of time? Do you want to involve escrow arrangement? Do you want to keep in escrow? These are some of the points you need to look at when you are doing your due diligence and when you are writing your report. It's a problem. It's also a problem-solving exercise. So when you found out the problem, you've done your analysis, you've advised on the structure, you now have to begin to find mitigants. And I'll tell you some of them. You can say, oh, they should take insurance. You can say, oh, because there appears to be mutual distrust, certain CPs need to be fulfilled, but the seller wants to see the money, show me the money. So you can have an escrow agent who will hold the money. That's another way you can deal with it. Some other things you can do is to put representations and warranties, is to have a material adverse effect provision in your due diligence, in your sale and purchase agreement. Another thing you may do is to ask for some form of security. You can ask for personal guarantee. You can create security over other assets of that person beyond, of the company, beyond their current assets. You can ask for a standby letter of credit so that you can immediately call on without any, or on unconditional, without condition, corporate guarantee. That's another thing you can. That's another thing you can do. So ultimately, the goal is to be able to mitigate the risk. You mitigate the risk on behalf of your client. You tell them how to mitigate those risks. And in some cases, you could even have a table with legends. Legends are colors. Red means high risk. Maybe yellow means medium risk. Green means no risk, or for information purposes. You can have a segment that has an executive summary that lists all those risks and mitigants. And then you can put a legend to them to rate the risk. Now, due diligence is conducted to identify the environmental, operational, compliance, legal, technical risk in the project or the asset. It's also conducted to develop a risk matrix outlining risk and responsible parties for best able to deal with the risk, to guide for the contractor allocation of risk in the deal or project documentation, to give the buyers or acquirer a better understanding of the asset or the target company, to verify the investor or buyer's initial assumptions regarding the project, to assist in cost-benefit analysis. So did it help you identify this risk, determine party who is able to best deal with the risk, determine how you best deal with those risks, what mitigants you can adopt, helps with allocation of risk in the deal, helps in even cost benefit analysis, helps remember the example I gave. We're able to find out that the asset was going to be revoked, and then we approached DPR, and DPR gave us assurances upon our providing certain pieces of information and documentation, and they assured us they were not going to revoke as long as the deal closed, and we told we showed the client our initial findings that the asset was at risk, and on that basis we were able to negotiate a lower price for that asset, you understand, without necessarily telling them the information we got from the DPR, which is now known as the Commission Authority in short. So the commission, that's the upstream, Nigerian Petroleum Regulatory Upstream Commission is for upstream, and the authority is for midstream and downstream. So when you hear people refer to the authority or the commission, they generally will be speaking to Commission for Upstream Transactions, Authority for Midstream and Downstream Transactions. What's the deal? License acquisition or share acquisition, acquisition of undertaking, acquisition of asset, privatization, project development, or concession. So there are different deal types. What you might be doing is you might be acquiring just a license. Now, if you're acquiring such a license, what might be important will be different from if you are doing a share acquisition. In a license acquisition, you are more interested in issues related to the license. Who owns the license? The tenure of the license? Is the license at risk? What does the license cover? What are the terms of that license? What are the times for transfer? Do you need third-party approval or consent to be able to transfer that license? Those are some of the key things. But for a share acquisition, CAC is very, unlike license, CAC is very, your search at CAC, both that online search and physical. Because I don't know if you've seen that, I'm doing a transaction at the moment, and we found out that the information, the physical information at CAC is different from what you see online. So we had to do both, and we had to align. And once you align both, you then need to have the CAC update your records online. That's what you do. So I'm currently doing a transaction like that, and we had to go to CAC to do a physical check beyond the online check. Acquisition of undertaking is another thing. Asset acquisition would then be different usually from a share acquisition, because what you are looking at is more of the asset, issues connected to the asset, various issues connected to the asset. Then privatization. Are you looking at a privatization deal? And privatization deals have their own rules. The very important is I'm currently doing a deal where one of the privatizations in the energy sector, there were issues, and the concessionaire is taking the federal government to international arbitration. So I was the expert that wrote the expert opinion, and I'm providing a lot of support to them. And one thing that's helped is because I have the history, I mean, for whatever it was, I was involved in 10 of the power sector privatization deals when they did those deals between 2010, 2011, and 2013, So I have a lot of the history. And the counterparty, the lawyers representing the government didn't have a lot of history. So I was able to help the lawyers representing this company. I was not representing the company at international arbitration. My firm and I representing the firm just wrote the expert opinion, and like I say, as lawyers, we should charge well, I think we charge substantially for that opinion, and it's something I think everyone too should do. So one key thing when you do your privatization deal are the RFP, the rules, the request for proposal, the RFP rules, the rules for that particular transaction, because you have to follow the rules. In your due diligence as a lawyer, you have to analyze the rules. You have to highlight those aspects of the rules your client must ensure that they fulfill, so that their bids are not considered non-conforming, you understand? Or is it a project development you're doing? Then you'd have to look at issues relating to that project, its bankability and all of that. Or is it a concession? So your deal type would help you determine what the key issues are. And things that that generally you should be looking at, principal laws and regulations. First, you even have to determine that asset, that your transaction, does it have statutory flavor? When you begin to talk about power, it's a regulated industry. If you're talking about oil and gas, it's quite regulated too. So you need to follow the law. You cannot do it without considering or without following the law. That's very crucial for your deal. You'd have to follow the law. You'd have to check. You'd have to find out and be sure that you meet, you comply with mandatory provisions of the law. That's very crucial for your transaction. You have to fulfill all the mandatory provisions. License and approval issues, company records and resolutions, indebtedness. These are general issues that you need to consider in your due diligence. Material contracts, your MEMATs, particularly where it's a shared deal. Taxation, because where it's a shared deal, taxation is very important, because if there are tax liabilities, you are the new owner. Like we said, under the FIRS Act, even 5, 6, 7 years, they can go back to your records. What of issues around regulatory compliance? Those need to also be adequately addressed. Your due diligence, the hours of your due diligence. What are the things you need to look out for? What are the issues, the hours in your due diligence? What are the issues going on in relating to that deal? You should understand that there will be a virtual data room, usually now. So when you do your due diligence, how do you write your report? How do you conduct your due diligence? Is what we are going to generally speak to now for a few minutes. Now, there are two means of doing due diligence now, of setting up your due diligence room. One is what they call a virtual data room. The other is where they physically provide what you require and you go in to do your checks and make your findings. In some cases, they will tell you you can photocopy. In some other cases, they say, oh, you can't photocopy. You'd have to write your report in there. I was doing a deal, or I was involved in a deal many years ago, and to even conduct due diligence, to even do anything relating to that deal, you had to be in a particular city in the US. You understand? You had to be in the US and in a particular city. You could also send out questionnaires. You'd have a due diligence checklist and you'd have questionnaires. That due diligence checklist and questionnaires would you send that to the counterparty or the party you are diligencing so that they can provide answers. You'd have, and a lot of law firms have done it over time, that you'll be able to ask your friends for templates depending on the sort of transaction. So you need to think about it, get people, if it's an energy deal and you have people who are stronger in finance, get people from your finance team, get people from your corporate commercial team, get people from your land, from your real estate, because you need to send a large list of questions. But be sure that those questions and those issues are relevant to your due diligence. And you also have to do regulatory confirmation. So there's no universal way of writing your due diligence. You understand? You can, but the key thing is you'd have to get your facts right, and your facts have to be complete facts. You have to write all the facts you require. One. Two, apart from writing all the facts you require, secondly, you have to, apart from writing all the facts you require, you have to also analyze those facts like we stated. In doing that, you'll be raising the challenges, the issues, the risks, and you also be providing mitigants to those risks. What are the alternatives? What are the options? More often than not, you may or may not not more often, you may or may not make a call as to whether your client should do the deal. In extreme cases where it's clear they shouldn't do the deal, you may want to suggest, it's just a recommendation. But of course, please ensure that because you're a lawyer, you'd have to have a portion stating exemptions, limitations, and exceptions, letting them know that your due diligence findings are not absolute. And you don't want to be held responsible. You don't want to have liability for what you say. Even though you've done your best to be accurate, you want to put that in your report. I don't know, some of you might have seen that in reports. They will have a segment, exceptions, exemptions, and limitations. You want to ensure that you have that in your due diligence report so that the party doesn't come up later and say, oh, this fact was wrong, and they want to sue you, and then you are beginning to run up and down issues around liability and all of that. So you want to exempt yourself as a lawyer from liability. You also want to limit your due diligence report to the date of that report, because things can change after that date, after that day. So you want to limit the accuracy of your report to the date of that report. You also want to ensure that you are accurate to the extent possible. You want to ensure that you leave nothing outstanding and your facts are correct. You want to make sure you reviewed all relevant documentation, and you want to have received your questionnaires. And I said, and the checklist. And I always say that before you complete your sale and purchase agreement, you want to have completed your due diligence, because the results of your due diligence and your due diligence report would determine some things you would write in your sale and purchase agreement. And in fact, like I stated before, it will also even help you determine how you should structure your transaction, which is very, very crucial. What are the key issues when you talk about due diligence generally? And what are the things you need to take into consideration? Before the execution of your definitive agreement, you need to do your due diligence. You need to do data gathering. You may have to sign non-disclosure confidentiality or exclusivity agreements, because the counterparty is providing you information, particularly from the party providing you information. They might require that you sign this. You'd have to visit the data room, whether it's physical or a virtual data room. Lawyers informal investigation at times. At times, if it's a property, if there's an asset, real estate related to that transaction, you may have to go behind the scenes to make informal inquiries. You can go to that area and ask questions to do your investigation. What are the booby traps? Inequitable, unworkable title, unreasonably limited scope, unreasonably short examination period. These are some of the booby traps or facts that have been hidden. You understand? And these are some of the things you have to unravel. What are the political risks? What are even the market risks? You know, you'd have to determine some of these to be able to write a robust due diligence. You have to assemble and manage the due diligence team. Prepare your due diligence checklist, send it and get it back. What are the gatekeepers and what are the data logs? You would have a working list. You understand? And the booby traps are overlap, redundancy, limited time and pressure, or reasonably limited scope. So areas of due diligence, I've already explained some of this. Engineering, are there defects that are obvious to you and that might affect the valuation? Land, you have to look at the title. Are there encumbrances? Are there contractual obligations? What is the land use? Because for certain property, when you buy land, if you look at your C of O document, you find out that they say that that land is for residential purposes or it's for a particular purpose. So you can change the use. If you want to use it for something else, it's important. That's probably maybe a CP, depending on the sort of deal, or it could be a CS, but you'd have to deal with that. Legal, title, opinion review, pending or threatened litigation, regulatory compliance issues. Accounting, income, repairs, payment, receipts, accounts, taxes. Environmental can be very serious, particularly for upstream deals. You know, polluter pays. There are a lot of principles you need to take into consideration. And you need to be sure who takes the liability for environmental pollution. Are the buyers going to reserve some monies in account for a period of time so that if there's any environmental claim, that money can be used to deal with that? Or is it going to be a situation where you carry environmental liability? Because you have two types of environmental damage. Some are immediately obvious. Some, while the damage has been done, the effect is not felt until a very long time. So it will depend on that type. So you want to, at times, you can have a cutoff period. You can say for 2 years. If there are no environmental claims, then there's no more liability on the seller. So it would really depend on your deal, and it would depend on whether you're buyer or seller, what you ask for in your due diligence. corporate structure. The jurisdiction, is the company in good standing? You have to look at the MEMAT. You have to look at the management personnel, organizational chart. Does it have are there parent and subsidiary relationships? And what are those relationships? Do they have any rights? Do they have control? Ownership and control. Capitalization, control agreements, right of refusal, right of first refusal, minutes of meetings. You see some of these deals where NNPC is trying to exercise the right of first refusal. That's an important aspect. And you have to make a call whether you want to do the deal at all, particularly when you know that the NNPC may be exercising a right of first refusal. Assets, the property, intellectual property, licenses, etc. I'd mentioned accounts before, insurance, the contracts. Do they have loan agreements and encumbrances? Is there any commitment or obligation to third parties? Are there other commitments? Employment issues are also critical. What are the policies? You know that if I'm not mistaken, CAMA does make provision to protect employees too when you have certain kinds of deals. Is there litigation? Do you need to provision? Do you need to advise the finance people to provision? Because there is substantial litigation in court, and there's substantial litigation in court, which then means that if you are not careful, there may be losses. If you are not careful, there may be losses in the future if that litigation is won by the party that's taking them to court. Then environmental issues, permits, control reports, incidences, all of these are very important in writing your due diligence, because you need to take all of this into consideration. Otherwise, you may discover in the future that there are problems. Now, your due diligence report, risk assessment, you'd have to determine what the risks are. You inquire into all relevant aspects of the past, present, and predictable future of the entity or the asset. You reveal all important facts and potential liability. You analyze the collected facts. You show the level of importance. You assess all the risks, including financial, legal risk profile, technological risk profile, etc. You make an informed decision. In many cases, you do not want to say buy or don't buy. But from your analysis, it's clear the position you take. But your decision is based on facts and analysis. And then you provide mitigants. So benefit of interested. And remember, one thing I didn't mention in your DD report, state that for the sole benefit of the guy who has contracted you, the guy who has engaged you. That's very important. So that if someone else picks up the report and they want to rely on it, and unfortunately it becomes a problem for them, they can't sue you. It's not for them. It's for the sole benefit of the party who has engaged you. And remember, in your analysis, you'd have to provide mitigants. And I'll give you examples of those mitigants. Always remember, problems no dey finish. So you provide practical solutions, have the bigger picture in view. For most problems, it's just changing the structure or changing the proposed structure of your deal. Also, find out if there are incentives or disincentives in the industry. Is there are there issues around exports or imports? Is there import? Can you obtain an import duty exemption certificate? Complete your DD, due diligence, before completing your sale and purchase agreement. Your DD impacts the sort of representations and warranties you put in your SSA or your SPA, your share sale agreement, your share sale and purchase agreement, your asset sale and purchase agreement, depending on what you call it. Your DD impacts what you requisition from the counterparty, because some facts are incomplete. So you need to seek further clarity from the other party, the party you are diligencing. Regulatory compliance and confirmation. Be factually correct. You need to be factually correct. And you need to to be spot on. You can't afford to miss out facts, so that once you state what those facts are, they help the client determine how to go. Don't be a big man. Go to the field, go to the data room, find out even more senior people, partners, senior associates. At times, if some facts seem to be incongruous or seem to be unreasonable, it may be better to roll up your sleeves and go to the data room yourself. You understand? It may be better. Those are some of the important points you need to take into consideration when you do your due diligence. So I think, and I hope I'm not wrong, that there's the opportunity to ask and answer questions. So the last few minutes, maybe we could use that to ask and answer questions. Let the host confirm this to be the case. Thank you very much. I hope you found this presentation useful. And to end it, I have written two really good books. They also deal with due diligence. For today only, for those who are interested, I'll give a 20% discount if you buy both books. If you buy one of each, I will give a 10% discount, and that's for today only, and for those who are attending this program. Thank you very much, and I would wait to hear your questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for this insightful presentation. To give a summary of Dr. Ayodele's presentation, he commenced by giving us a teaser poem on Africa, My Africa by David Diop of the mid-20th century, who in one of his lines described Africans as proud warriors in ancestral savannah. The doctor then went ahead to give us a brief introduction of the African energy industry before venturing to educate us on what due diligence entails in the energy industry. He said due diligence is very important even in social interaction. He mentioned the different deals and transaction types due diligence can be conducted in, such as license acquisition, privatization, project development, and concession, to mention a few. He also noted how due diligence can be conducted, for example, physical visitations, questionnaires, regulatory confirmations, etc. Then he explained the key issues involved in the initial phase of due diligence, which he listed as data gathering, non-disclosure, confidentiality or exclusivity, data room visit, and the lawyer's formal investigation. Dr. Ayodele then mentioned that the booby traps in due diligence investigation is inequitable or unworkable titles, unreasonable limited scope, and unreasonable short examination period. After this, he later explained that due diligence also has another phase known as the primary phase, and the key items to be noted here are: 1, how to assemble and manage your due diligence team; 2, your checklist and gatekeepers and data logs. The booby traps he mentioned here are its limited time and pressure, overlap and redundancy, and its unreasonable limited scope. Kindly note that due diligence are essential in different areas such as engineering, transaction, land, legal, accounting, and environmental situation. Finally, he mentioned that the art of conducting the due diligence in energy transactions are: 1, to profile practical solution; 2, have the bigger picture in view and be factually correct and spot on, just to mention a few. Kindly note that you can type in your questions or comments in the message box, or raise your hand and the admin will unmute you to ask your questions or make your comments. Doctor, In an environmental transaction, where do you start conducting your due diligence from? Using South Africa as a case study.
Okay. When you conduct, so where do you start your due diligence from a lawyer's perspective? I think I'll start it from correspondence obtained from the regulator. But also recall that in this sort of deals, you probably have an expert who is going to undertake the environmental DD. So I will check for communication from the regulator, whether they've been in breach. I will seek to find out their environmental plan, whether they've done an EIA, and if possible, where necessary, I might go to the site myself or have police go to the site. Maybe they can speak to people in that environment. So I will start from documentation. I will start from correspondence from the commission or from the authority, because those can then help you know what else you should be asking for or looking out for. I would also look at their contracts, particularly the environmental related bits of their contract, to find out if they've been in compliance with what they ought to do. And then I will also ask them questions. That's how I will, and I'll put my findings in the document, in my DD report. That's how I go about environmental. And if you are going specifically to South Africa, similar to what I've stated, they also have regulatory bodies that communicate with you frequently. So you want to check the communication and whether you've been in breach. They still do a lot around coal and mining, solid minerals, and you will want to check with the relevant regulatory authority. You want to obtain communication. You want to check the environmental obligations under the law. Thank you.
At what stage do we start charging our clients when conducting due diligence on a transaction?
Okay, thank you very much. What I like to do is it's a two tranche payment. One tranche is before you start at all. I like people wetting my beak, like my client, my partner will say. You don't want a situation where you now finish the work and you now start chasing the client. At times you do the work and you start begging the client for your money. So if you've already collected half to 3/4 before you start, then even if it takes them a while, because if the report suggests that they shouldn't buy it, they won't be excited. So, and if they're not excited, you might have a challenge getting your money. So I usually advise that you charge from the beginning before you start work at all. You would have gotten a part of your money, anywhere from 1/4 to 3/4, depending on how you negotiate. But please take some money before you start at all. Thank you.
Doctor, can you advise us on how to charge our fees as lawyers in energy transactions when conducting due diligence? What are the current rates?
Okay, so it depends on how you want to do it. You may want to be scientific, particularly where you have experience behind you. If you have experience behind you, then you may be looking at how long it took you to do the last one, how many partner hours, how many senior associate, how many associate hours, how many support staff hours, and what you charge hourly. You can do the maths from experience, or you ask someone else how many hours they have a sense. A lot of law firms use data now and use this online recording means to record time spent on deals. So if you have a sense of how much time you spent on a similar deal, you can do the maths. But with time, you begin to have a sense. I'm not sure anyone should do a due diligence exercise in the upstream sector for less than 10 million. Also, when you consider that upstream does a lot of it's dollarized, and the naira to dollar exchange rate is terrible now, such that I think it's over 500, it's over 600 now. So you do the math. It means if you charge $10,000, that's 6 point something million, and do you really want to do a due diligence exercise for $10,000? So you'll be looking at least $20,000 up. I'm not sure anyone for midstream and downstream. It may be lesser. You may be able to get away with maybe 8.5 million, but I'm not sure you want to do any due diligence for less than 5 million. I'm not sure you want to. At times law firms out of competition and wanting to do deals on that charge. We try not to do that, because at the end of the day, we're doing a disservice to all of us. At some point, even your clients will begin to say, oh, but last time you guys collected 1 million naira for this, why are you asking for 50 million? Or I heard that when you did this for this client, it took 2 million. But you did it because you wanted the deal. You were desperate. Now everybody knows you to be an expert in conducting due diligence. Now you want to chat properly. Unfortunately, your history is a problem. So those are my thoughts.
Sir, can you give us an example of a due diligence report? Is it possible, like a sample? Hello?
I show you a sample. Sorry, I didn't know I was muted. You want me to show you a sample now?
Yes. Do you have one with you at the moment?
Okay, let me check. Just hold on. Maybe you can ask me other questions while.
Okay, there's a question on the screen. Ore Shotomi wants to know, for environmental due diligence, how do you create a standard financial reporting?
Okay, so I think you'll be asking the finance guys that more. I'm not quite sure. First, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. The relationship between financial reporting and environmental. Okay, so I get what you mean by financial reporting, but I guess you may need financial people to support you. You provide the raw data that you can't see or you can't provide as a lawyer, and then you will then have the financial people put numbers to it. I think it will be a collaborative approach. You understand? I think it will be a collaborative approach. I don't think it's something a lawyer should do alone, unless it's a lawyer that already has experience or has done financial stuff in the past.
Okay, someone wants to know how much they should charge when conducting due diligence on a refinery.
I don't think you should charge, depending on the refinery. What's the capacity of the refinery? Maybe it's not even so much about that. It depends on the volume of work. Documentation. Is it a new refinery? Is it an old refinery that has a lot of history? If it's a new refinery and the guys are complaining about money, maybe 10 million. If it's an old refinery, there's much more to do, maybe 14, 15 million at the minimum. If the guys have money, and they have money, and you're going to do an excellent job, maybe 22.5 million. If it's a new refinery. If it's an old refinery, maybe closer to 30 million. These are estimates, and I think it shouldn't be less than this. You could do much more, depending on if you think the guys have the capacity to pay more. So I'm looking for a due diligence report. I have several, but I want to be sure. Sorry. Please go on. I'm listening to.
I guess we don't have any question anymore. Okay, someone just sent in. Okay, no question. No more question.
Sorry, I'm looking for one. I would have.
Okay, someone suggested that can you give us the report so that we can send it to individual emails?
The challenge with that is that do I want to give away my style? actually. That I will need to take permission from the board of partners. What I could do is I can take away a lot from it to give me time and just send you like a template that just generally gives you an idea. And that'll take me a while. I can't do that now, then.
Can you
Unless you
just
just want
let us have a view of what it is? Since they're going to have
okay.
the recording, they can view it at their leisure.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Let me see. I'm just looking for
Thank you,
one
Doctor.
that is not too controversial. Just hold on. I probably have over 100 due diligence reports, but I'm trying to check which one I really want to show. Okay, let's see. Let me share. I'll just move through it quickly. I'm not sure. Where is it now? Okay. Okay, so I guess you can see it. So this is my report for the NIPP deal I'm doing. I've broken it down into assumptions and qualifications, reliance, those stuff I told you about, litigation, material contract, insurance. I think this is still the executive summary, and it already tells you the answer even if you don't read the entire thing. Then this is the main report, which is more elaborate. This is the preliminary report. There were very limited documents at this time, and it was 28 pages. You understand? So this is one report. I can look at another report, an oil and gas report. Okay, so I'm not screen sharing. I can show you one more report. I have several hundreds of pages, reports that are hundreds of pages. Let me see if I can show you one of those, but I just need to be careful what I'm showing. Let me look for one oil and gas DD report. DD. Okay, this is the DD. Let me see. I need to be careful. Which of these OMLs which one do I want to show them? Let's see. Sorry, give me a moment.
No problem, sir.
I guess that people want to come in. So, no, not this one. I can't show this. Sorry, I'm just trying to determine which due diligence report I can share. I'm sorry. Just give me a moment. Wow, can I show them this? This is a 76-page due diligence. Let me see where we don't have the names of the parties. Okay, let me share this. Let me see if I can share this. Just hold on. Okay, so you can see summary of findings. This is the 78-page due diligence, corporate issues, share capital, all of these, company secretary, all of encumbrances, employees, trademarks, all of these key findings. What are key findings? Registered charges, all of those. So it's similar structure. Business permit, taxes, all of those, then these are advisory. Natural gas issues, taxation, backing rights, depending on the regime. So you even have to understand the your deal well. You have to understand that industry for you to write your report, because there's something they call the backing rights regime, where even government can say for upstream, government can acquire some of your interest in a mining lease. You know, at the point you are converting from the prospecting from the license to the lease, government can back in and take a percentage. You understand? So that's crucial, and you need to take that into consideration when you're writing your report, depending on the regime. So you have to understand the regime where you are playing to be able to write a bespoke due diligence report. So those are samples very quickly. Unfortunately, and I'm sorry I couldn't show it to you more slowly because you have names of clients, and you know I'm careful around liability and confidentiality and all of that. Yes, so those are some of the issues you need to take into consideration when you do your due diligence. And you may want to adopt a style that works for you, provided you cover all those bases. You want to have an executive summary, because not everybody, the MD is not going to read your whole report. He just wants to look at the executive summary, and your executive summary should be clear as to your conclusion and your findings. So once you state your findings, and your conclusions are more like your mitigants, you understand? So if they say, oh, we like these mitigants, but we're not quite sure it helps our case well enough, we're not doing this deal. It helps them make a call. So the MD looks at the executive summary. Most executives are not going to look at the entire document. They're just going to look at the executive summary. I don't know. Any further questions? Any further?
Okay, we have one last question here, Doctor.
Okay, please go.
I don't think it's related to due diligence topic that we are discussing, but maybe you might want to take it. Boma Haduke, she's asking what's the challenge with state government employing renewables like solar in communities?
When you say what's the problem, I'm not quite sure I understand.
What's the challenge with state governments?
Okay. Some of the time is lack of planning. Some of the time is lack of cooperation from the regulators or even the communities themselves. It's a tough one. I'm dealing with 4 mini grids at the moment doing solar. 2 of them are isolated in rural areas. 1 of them, 3 are isolated. 1 is interconnected with the disco. Now, one key challenge we've had, is it even the state or whatever, is the community. And at times, regulatory challenges. The regulatory regime at times it's not quite what it should be. And you do certain things and the regulator is saying, oh, this is not what you're supposed to do. But we say it's not in the regulations, you know, and they say, yes, but this is what we do and this is how we do it. So at times it's financing, you know, because it could be quite expensive. At times the host communities themselves do not really know what they want. Why they want electricity? They don't really want to pay for it at times, and they say it's too expensive or whatever. So I think, and at times, corruption. They want to do it, but they want you to give them 20% of the interest in that company. And because they want you to give them 20% of the interest in that company, if it's an international company that cannot do such, they are going to call off the deal. So it's many reasons. I can't say that it's one reason. It depends on that particular state. It depends on the circumstances. So at times they buy poor quality equipment that don't last, and that itself is a problem. So I think it's hydra-headed. It's not one problem. It depends on how you look at it. The problem can be anything, from corruption to lack of capacity, getting the right personnel to deploy the solar, to getting the wrong advisors. For example, you can't get litigator to come and advise you on a renewable energy project. He doesn't understand projects. Easy is to go to court. But because it belongs to your political party, you want him to do the deal. So those are the problems I see.
Thank you, Doctor, for this wonderful presentation. I don't see any questions here, so this brings us to the end of another session of the training series of the Lawyers in Energy Network. This training series will continue tomorrow, but instead of 11 o'clock, we'll be doing 12. Kindly take note, Central African time, 12 o'clock Central African time. Doctor, we are very grateful for your time and wealth of experience as this was reflected in your presentation today. We really appreciate you a lot. I would like to extend our gratitude to our partners who made this training possible. Centurion Law Group and Brumshi Consultancy, we are grateful for your support. And to you, our participants, thank you once again for being part of this training. We hope you are benefiting a lot already. For those of us who would like to join the network as a member, you can visit our site at www.lawyersInenergynetwork.com and click on the subscription button on the top of the page to register. Kindly note that all the presentations and video recordings of this training have been sent to your email addresses while the video has been uploaded on YouTube. Every day we ensure that we upload or send email the presentations and the recordings of the training for that day to all the registered emails. For those of you complaining that you haven't gotten emails from us, we advise you re-register for the event so that your email can be in our mailing list. That way you'll be able to get all the recordings and the presentations. My name still remains Rakiba Oloko, and I'm the Executive Secretary of the Lawyers in Energy Network. I look forward to once again moderating this session with you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.